It's ironic that an entire book could be devoted to what's wrong with the language of academic. It's ironic because what's wrong is that academics write too many books about nothing to begin with. I went to school for 19 years to earn my law degree and wouldn't trade that experience for all the tea in China. But during that period, I lost count of the books I read that were about other books. Somewhere, at the very beginning of the history of the language of academic, there must have been the original sin. The first book written which claimed to be a scholarly treatment of a subject of consequence. From there, other scholarly books came into existence at a literally geometrically progressing rate. And when the substantive matter, which was the initial subject of discussion, lost its appeal, the scholars proceeded undeterred. Since they had all read each other's books, it was only natural that they should start writing in response to what they read. This proceeded at a geometric rate as well, with books written about books, theories about theories, treatises about treatises, ad nauseum, until reality became an oblique reference, a passing footnote, used sparingly and selectively, only to support those theories that the author expounded or to challenge those theories with which he disagreed. In this environment, the creation of a specialized language was only natural. Through the creation of academic, the scholars were able to insulate themselves from the ultimate objection to their work, being namely the question, so what does that have to do with anything? The insulating devices used in the language of academic are fascinating. Perhaps the most interesting is the footnote. Typically, a scholar will be midway through a particularly uninteresting paragraph. While reviewing the material, the author realizes he had better add something to liven up the text. Many writers would have sense enough to insert an anecdote to illustrate their point. But the user of pure academic instead inserts a footnote. The footnote serves three purposes. First, it helps to persuade the reader that the author has read at least one other book during his career. Second, it helps avoid cries of plagiarism from the author upon whose book the current book is based. And finally, it allows the author to imply that if the reader doesn't understand what the author is writing about, it is only because he hasn't read all the books that the author has read. The result can be circuitous. The most classic examples of circuity can be found in law. An attorney researching a point of law in what is known as a secondary source of material will find reference to a case in support of the proposition in a footnoted portion of the material. He will then read the footnoted case only to find that, in support of its conclusions, it recites by footnote the secondary source which cited it. A well-written book in the language of academic will be filled with footnotes in reference to prior works. Its primary purpose is to cause the reader, usually an unsuspecting student who regrets signing up for the course in the first place, to fall to his knees in awe of the author's ability to read and remember all the books he cited. Of course, professors are particularly fond of assigning such books to their student because they, by implication, are assumed to have read the books mentioned in the book assigned. It is worth noting, although it should go without saying, that just because an author lists an extensive bibliography doesn't mean that he has read the books in the bibliography. Even if he has read them, it certainly doesn't mean that he understood them. So on it goes in the language of academic, with books propagating themselves at an astounding rate, to the point where, as today in many fields, it is literally physically impossible for someone just entering a field to read all of the books in that area during his lifetime. So what's wrong with the language of academic as it relates to psychology, self-image, and self-help? What's wrong is that no one, and I'm convinced with increasing frequency, not even the authors, know what they're talking about. Imagine this. You are digging for gold, and after weeks of fruitless effort, you finally come upon a vein which holds promise. At first you are elated and begin to feverishly dig at and examine your find. You find large quantities of the genuine thing, but in addition, you also find quantities of pyrite or fool's gold mixed in. Your enthusiasm is dampened, but you quickly realize that despite the existence of the pyrite, there is still an abundance of gold to be found. The three languages of success seem similar to that vein of gold. While many of the nuggets found therein are worthless, there is still enough real gold to make mining the vein worthwhile. Our challenge as prospectors is to sort out the pyrite from the stuff that is of real value to us. The fact that each of the three languages of success has its own version of pyrite should not keep us from mining the rest. In our search for sound advice, we must be a little like the young boy who went to visit his uncle on the farm. As soon as he got out of the car, he spotted a 10-foot-high pile of horse manure near the barn. Gleefully, he ran to the pile, jumped on it, and began digging. Amazed, his parents and uncle ran to the pile and shouted, "What are you doing in that smelly mess?" The boy kept right on digging and shouted back, "With all this manure, there has got to be a pony in here someplace." Let's look for the ponies in the language of success. In every sales organization, there is such a thing as the instant success. Usually it's a young man or woman that has just come aboard and knows little about the product or service being sold. But what they lack in experience and knowledge, they more than make up for in enthusiasm and sincerity. These are the people who are, frankly, too dumb to know it's supposed to be difficult to sell things. In that blissful state of ignorance, they go out and set sales records, amazing the old-timers and causing the sales manager to reassess his entire sales program. Unfortunately, there is often an end to this stupendous early start. The end begins when the neophyte finally has an opportunity to realize that others, far more experienced than he, consider what he is doing unlikely, if not impossible, to sustain. That negative influence is enough to cause the newcomer to begin to gradually reassess his performance until ultimately he rationalizes away his fast start and begins plodding methodically and slowly along with the rest. In such a situation, the individual begins with the power of purposeful positiveness and ends by joining others in the world of militant mediocrity. We all enjoy working with an enthusiastic, sincere individual more than with one who is unexcited about what he or she is doing. The ability to sustain that positiveness over a period of time is where the real value of positive thinking lies. More aptly named positive living, it is a lifestyle that demands from each individual the highest standard of enthusiasm, commitment, and excellence in whatever they are doing. It is a logical, modern extension of the work ethic upon which this country was founded. It provides that even on days when a lesser person might throw up his hands and quit, the positive liver has enough discipline and good sense to keep plugging along, genuinely convinced of his ability to ultimately succeed. The language of positive recognizes success not as a destination, but as a journey. The entire process is an inside job. Fundamental to the concept of positive living is the free will school of thought, which has been a favorite subject of philosophers for years. It presumes that man is entirely able to affect his destiny as he wishes. Without this basic assumption, the language of positive would lose most of its meaning. The two profound advantages of the language of positive are, first, by presuming our ability to control our future, it provides a level of hope that no other language provides. Second, by insisting that each individual is totally responsible for his or her own level of success, it imposes a standard of personal responsibility unsurpassed in the language of success. The ideas within the language of positive that are of most value to us are those which provide reasonable and realistic techniques that we may use to sustain a level of enthusiasm and sincerity capable of propelling us to the accomplishment of the goals we seek.